What's up, guys? This is Rey-Jay back with another video. And in this one, I want to break down what's happening with SPY, Tesla, and the overall markets. And break down what's happening with the economic calendar moving forward as we have more data coming out for tomorrow. And what the setups are doing so far for SPY, the QQQ, and many other tickers. Just know that I am not a financial planner, so take nothing I'm saying as financial advice whatsoever. And also, if you guys can, please check out my Moomoo link that's down below or use my QR code right here to sign up. If you sign up for Moomoo with the link down below and deposit $100, you're going to get $20 of free Nvidia stock. If you deposit $2,000 or more, you're going to get $50 worth of Nvidia. Deposits $10,000 to get $300 worth of Nvidia stock, or deposits $50,000 or more to get $1,000 of free Nvidia stock. You're also going to qualify for a 3.6% APY base rate plus a 4.5% APY extra for 3 months, making it a total of an 8.1% APY. The offer ends very soon, so please use my link down below to sign up or use this QR code. Anyways, now let's talk about what's happening with the overall market. So I just wanted to mention that today we had a lot of sideways price action. SPY did not really break up or down. We were just stuck in the middle. And this is similar to what I was talking about yesterday, how there's going to likely be some consolidation between 686 and 680 on SPY as we continue to trade sideways like this. But as time goes on, there's going to be a big break in this wedge, either to the upside or the downside. And if we get a big break to the downside, we're looking at this gap at this 677 area. Now, the current setup, one thing you'll see is that it's making lower highs, and lower highs. So there is a greater probability that SPY will be attracted to filling this gap down here first. Now, of course, you want to watch for confirmation and follow the price action. That is going to be the best way to go about things. And also, there's an interesting pattern where when you look at, for example, our 30 minutes time frame, look at what SPY has been doing for the last couple of days. We basically gap up. This happened last Wednesday with FOMC. We gapped up and consolidated. Then we got a dump. Okay, and then on Thursday of last week, we kind of just traded sideways throughout the day. Then we dumped towards the end of the day. On Friday, we gapped up. We started off with this sell-off, we bounced, then we sold off more as the day went on. And then today we gapped up, we bounced, and then we just rejected and started to sell off, and then we consolidated as the time went on. So a very common pattern is that the market likes to gap up, likes to push in the mornings, then starts to dump either a little bit after open or by midday. Then we consolidate to finish the days. That's been very, very common. Overall, we're in this consolidation phase. However, despite that, there's going to be more data coming out very soon that could affect and cause more volatility. And like I said before, we're still making lower highs, so the odds do favor downside a bit more for now. Same thing with the QQQ. Although this is trading more sideways than SPY, notice that we're still technically making lower highs. We made a lower high rate here. This was from last week. We made another lower high today. We did not take out the highs, and we're still trading sideways. And then it's also worth mentioning that SPY and the QQQ have these gaps. So there's still a lot of gaps below on the QQQ and SPY. There's one down here at 617, another at 610. SPY also has some gaps below in case we do get a rejection. So I would recommend just watching these at least for now. But the question is, what data is coming out? How is this going to be affecting the markets, and will we get some downside? I'll give you guys some answers in the next couple of minutes. So for tomorrow, it's going to be another quiet data day. Tomorrow, I think, is also going to mark the possible longest government shutdown in history if it continues until then. And as of right now, with the government shutdown continuing, much of the data will not be coming out. We're not going to be getting the JOLTS job openings or anything like that. Instead, we have Bowman from the Fed giving a speech tomorrow morning. Then we have some minor data coming out involving the Fed, the New York Fed Treasury purchases, and the economic optimism index report, at 10 o'clock a.m. And that's pretty much it. Very, very minor data for tomorrow as the market is consolidating for now. However, on Wednesday, we actually have important data coming out. At 8:15 a.m., I believe we have the ADP employment change coming out. That's going to likely cause some high volatility. It's one of the first times we're getting some jobs numbers, which could cause a big move because right now the Fed is keeping their eyes on the labor market. The labor market is very important for the Fed's policies. And I'm going to show you proof of that based off what we just heard today. Then at 9:45 a.m. on Wednesday, we have the S&P Global composite and services PMI, then more services data after that. So Wednesday is going to be a bigger data day. Tomorrow is going to be a bit more quiet since we have minor data and we're not really getting major jobs numbers because of the government shutdown, which is continuing. Now, why is the labor market so important right now? Well, we just had Lisa Cook from the Fed come out, and she has said that there's going to be more risk of further labor market weakness than that of a risk of higher inflation. And that is what we're hearing so far, although she has not endorsed another rate cut for next month. So, what does this mean? Basically, the Fed has a dual mandate, but they are prioritizing the labor market right now. And based off the contractions and the weakness we're seeing, the Fed is more inclined to be a little bit more lenient. They're kind of like easing up on their policy, which is why the data is showing us that the Fed is buying back more and more treasury bonds and mortgage backed securities. However, I just want to note that we are still waiting on more data for more confirmation for the Fed to have more confidence in another cut for December. And that's what we're essentially waiting for. That's why the Fed is not just going to scream, cuts, cuts, cuts are coming like crazy. They have to be a little bit more careful, at least for now. So on top of this, I'm also going to be looking at other things that are important. Keep in mind that we also have Uber, Shopify, and Pfizer announcing their earnings tomorrow morning. And then we have AMD and Supermicro after the market close. Now, Palantir just came out today and the share price is kind of flat. So we're going to see what this leads to. But tomorrow is going to be a big day for semiconductors with AMD's earnings. Palantir had good earnings overall. I would say they did relatively well. We ended up seeing them beating their EPS and revenue, which was great. We had good contracts that came out, and they ended up exceeding the expectations for their guidance. They ended up raising their guidance, which is great. But that's what we're seeing at least thus far. However, the share price still came down after the call. I'll talk more about that in just a couple of minutes. Two more things that are very important involving politics. So, number one, unfortunately, the US government shutdown is approaching the longest shutdown in history. The threshold is going to be tomorrow. And from what I'm seeing, it looks like there's no deal, there's no agreements to essentially fund the government yet. Not the best of news. It really affects millions of everyday Americans. My heart goes out to the Americans that are impacted by this. It's very difficult to hear about this. And for the stock markets, there is uncertainty as a result of this. And simultaneously, I just want to add on that lots of data is not coming out. We're still waiting to see when this government is finally going to be funded. It's been taking a while. So hopefully, this issue is resolved as soon as possible. Hopefully, we get some kind of deal, but we're still waiting. It's just happening like that. We have to be patient. Um, on top of this, there's been some more news involving President Trump's tariffs. So the U.S. Supreme Court is going to be holding oral arguments on Wednesday over the legality of President Trump's tariffs imposed under a law called the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. So they're going to be looking at the legality of it with the oral arguments, and this is going to be affecting all kinds of tariffs. For example, the tariffs involving China and Hong Kong, the reciprocal tariffs will be affected, a bunch of them, right? The other duties, the unfair practice tariffs, the list goes on, right? All these tariffs are going to be affected by this, and we're going to see what the Supreme Court rules. President Trump mentioned this is going to be a massive decision. And he said this because he believes his tariffs are very necessary for negotiating trade, and it's very important for defending the U.S. and its national security. So we'll see what happens with that. As of right now, the market is in a consolidation. We're getting very tight in this wedge. So I expect a little bit more tightness for maybe another day. And then I think by Wednesday, we're looking for a big move, either approaching or after AMD and Supermicro's earnings, and after we get some important jobs numbers on Wednesday. There's lots of data coming out on Wednesday. It's a more data heavy day. So that's when I expect higher volatility. And I think tomorrow we start off with some consolidation. So here's the thing. If SPY manages to break past 686 and we take out this high over here, then yes, we're looking for 688 plus and then new highs. If we're bearish and we fail at 682 and we can't hold this, of course, there's going to be a risk of 680 and eventually this gap fall to 677 or below. I would not be surprised if we see some consolidation tomorrow. We might gap up again, come back down towards like 681, bounce again, just consolidate like this, get really, really tight. And then if we keep making lower highs, this is going to likely be favoring 677 or below for a rug pull move, a move right back down. I think that's by far one of the most likely possibilities. There's a greater probability of downside looking at the current setup, but that is once again a probability, not a guarantee. Nothing in the stock market's guaranteed, so always watch your levels, be unbiased, but just know that so far the setup favors consolidation tomorrow and then maybe some downside by Wednesday. I would like to see us fill these gaps. And like I mentioned in my previous video, it would be a blessing if SPY comes down to fill these gaps, especially the one at like 672, because I still believe we're going to surpass the 700s by the end of the year. With the Fed about to turn on the money printer, of course, right? There's a good chance more upside will likely be coming. So this would be a nice opportunity in case we do get some major downside. So we'll be watching that very closely. But just know that the downside risk is there to start off November. Same thing with the QQQ. The QQQ is also making lower highs, lower highs, and lower highs. We have a gap down here. There's also a big gap at 617. If the triple Q loses tomorrow, 629, we're looking for an attempt for 625. If we break 636, we're looking for a big breakout. We could gap up, then dip, and then just like consolidate in this wedge for some time. And then I would not be surprised if we dip lower for 625 or below again. I would prefer that scenario. It would be a lot more healthy for the market to slow down, but we'll see just to be safe. Although the setup is bearish, watch your levels. Notice that IWM is making lower highs, lower highs, lower highs, and lower highs. We could bounce a little bit right over here to retest our key EMAs, but then it's still favoring another rejection and a move back down. ES is also making lower highs right now. We have resistance at this 68.90 area and support down here at 68.65. So I do see a risk of us coming back down right here to retest our 50 EMA. And if that fails us, we could be once again dipping even more. So watch that very, very closely. Same thing with NQ. Notice that we're just making lower highs, and lower highs, not looking too good. And then I'm also eyeing, there's a gap over here at 26,000, another gap all the way down here around 25,500. So if this yellow line right here at 25,886 breaks, this yellow line right here, yes, we're going to be likely dipping to fill that gap. We don't have confirmation of that yet. And we have to break 26,300 to be more bullish. We're favoring a dip and some downside if that breaks, and there is that risk of us coming down to fill that gap. Bitcoin also is rejecting right here. We're going to see if we hold above this 107,000 area. If not, we could be dipping to 105,000. For Tesla, we're looking a bit more bullish right here. We're making higher highs and higher lows. So I think that we're doing a great job at holding up. Now, it's possible Tesla comes down in the morning and retests the 460s before potentially bouncing again. I think that we're going to likely attempt to outperform the markets. We need a bad piece of news to lose 460 to turn more bearish to dip back down. If we lose 460, we could be retesting 455 and 448, but I don't really favor that. I'm favoring consolidation and a break higher. So we'll see how it goes. So watch that very closely. For Nvda, we're making higher lows here. However, the problem is that now we have a double top leg structure. I think that AMD's earnings could affect this, and there is this gap down here. So I think the setup is favoring 202 again. Downside risk is there. Apple got a pump in rejection after earnings. We need to get back above 270. If not, we're looking for 265 or below. On Netflix, we're making lower highs right here. We're going to see if we get back above 1100 and 1130. If not, we could reject. Might pop a bit before it starts turning back down. On MSTR, we're making lower highs all over again. If that doesn't hold, we could be tipping back down towards 250. On Celsius, we're making lower highs. We have resistance at 60.6 and 61.3 and support at 58. We might bounce for 60 before it turns back down. Supermicro is making lower highs here. We have resistance at 51.7, support at 50.1, but there is a risk of us dipping to fill this gap at 48, so keep that in mind. Palantir also got a pump and dump after earnings. Something is happening during the call. It's happening in real time right now, so I'm not talking about every specific detail yet, but now we're favoring a move back down to 98, and don't forget that there is that gap below. So it looks like there was a possible liquidity grab over here before it turns back down, and there are these gaps below, so if we get a rejection, that could also be another bearish catalyst. For Rivian, we pumped and dumped, unfortunately, and we're looking for a move back down towards 13 flats. I think we had some negative news that came out. SoFi is going to likely retest 29.98 or below. AMD is kind of flat right here. Right here, we have 262 as our resistance and 254. We're in the middle. If we can't break this resistance, we're going to likely continue to consolidate. But honestly, guys, it depends on earnings, so I can't make promises about this. ARM is also rejecting right here. We need to see if 170 holds. If not, we could be dipping back down to 166. PayPal is showing some weakness, looking for 66 as our potential target. Unfortunately, it's showing some weakness. Coinbase is at support at 325. It needs to hold this in balance. If not, there is a risk of it dipping to not only fill the gap, but dip back down to the low 320s. There's a slight divergence on Amazon, so it's favoring a move back down to 215. We'll see what happens after that. Meta's on a downtrend. We're going to see what happens as we approach 625. Google's also trying to bounce right here, so we have resistance at 285, and we'll see how it goes. We also have support at 280, so we're in the middle. I think we could retest 285, and we'll see what happens after that. Microsoft is also on a bit of a downtrend. We're going to see if 515 holds. If not, we could be dipping back down towards 510. And then Oracle is also on a bit of a downtrend. We're making lower highs right here. So we could be dipping back down to like 255 and 215. We'll see what happens after that. DJT is looking a bit more bearish. We're going to likely be dipping to the low 14s. The VIX, I'm in the middle with the VIX. You could argue there's like a slanted inverse head and shoulders here, or you could argue the opposite. I'm in the middle with the VIX. I would like to see this try to get back above at least 17.5 to start bouncing more. It's in a consolidation phase, but we're going to see if it bounces or not right here. And the 10 years kind of flat, so give this some time. The dollar is also kind of pumping a bit, which tends to be a bearish sign for the markets, but we'll see just to be safe. So just to clarify, SPY and the QQQ are in a consolidation, but there is downside risk looking at the current setups as we're making lower highs on SPY, and we have lots of gaps to fill. It's going to depend a lot on what happens with, I would say, AMD and Supermicro's earnings, mainly AMD tomorrow. And then also the data coming out on Wednesday, that may have a big effect on us as we have employment numbers and very important ISM services data, which is important for the services sector. Tomorrow, the data is a bit more quiet, so expect some consolidation, but I would not be surprised if we just consolidate like this before we continue to fall. But the downside risk does look higher as of right now. That's what I'm seeing. So with that being said, I thank you all so much for listening. Never forget to always set stops and to be very unbiased with the way in which you go about things in this market. It's a very tricky market. There's lots of manipulation out there designed to hurt retail, and you have to be very careful with the way in which we go about things. I would once again tell you to just follow the trend and watch your levels, and just know that we might see some consolidation before potentially dipping lower. That's the most likely possibility right now. Same thing with the QQQ. We're also consolidating. There is some downside risk looking at this setup. And I do think that we're going to likely retest like 629. And if that does not hold, once again, these lows could be retested. If we break these lows, we could easily come down to fill that gap at 617. And if that happens, like I said before, I'm not scared. I'm not phased. I see big dips as more buying opportunities for the end of the year because I still think the market will be very bullish to finish off this year. And we're seeing potential opportunities that are coming. Why do I say that? Because once again, the Fed is going to be turning on the money printer very soon. Right, they're transitioning away from quantitative tightening. And I think it's going to have a very profound effect on the markets and such. But we'll talk more about that later on. Anyways, I'll see you guys tomorrow. I thank you all so much for listening. Get ready for some more earnings. We have Uber, Shopify, and Pfizer tomorrow morning alongside AMD and Supermicro. AMD is going to be the biggest one tomorrow and one of the biggest ones of the week. So expect some volatility heading into Wednesday. And we'll be very, very patient with this market. Thank you all so much for listening. Enjoy your guys' days, nights, or evenings, wherever you guys are around the world. And peace out.